start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Amy Danforth.
Present.
Larry Hood.
Present.
Jonathan Nell.
Present.
Jake Dawn.
Present.
Scott Beatty.
Present.
Reese Bader.
Present.
Charles Pearson.
Here.
Dave Moore.
Present. All right, we'll start with the approval of minutes for the May 3rd, 2021 meeting.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
All good, you can have it.
Call the question.
Amy Danforth.
Yes.
Larry Hood.
Yes.
Jonathan Nell.
Yes.
Jake Dawn.
Yes.
Scott Beatty.
Yes.
Charles Pearson.
Yes.
Dave Moore.
Yes. I'd like to welcome Larry Hood back.
Yes.
Welcome back, Councilman Hood.
I'm glad to be back, Mayor. Thank you.
We have any reports from committees, boards, and commissions?
Mr. Mayor, on May the 20th, the Planning and Economic Development Committee held a meeting to discuss a planning commission ordinance, or two planning commission ordinances that were amended, and a amendment to the comprehensive plan. All were moved forward to tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Also had a public utility meeting. At that meeting, we discussed a couple commercial sewerage rates that are on the agenda tonight, and also the placement of an air monitor and weather station out at the wastewater treatment plant.
Also, on May the 20th, we had a Finance Committee meeting. We discussed the Parks Department replacing the Bobcat. We also talked about the Erie Avenue project from 5th Street to 8th Street. Also talked about the 18th Street Hoosier Heartland. We talked about the kayak launch at Spencer Park. We referred to the Parks Department to come back to the council at a later date. And then on June the 7th, we had a Finance Committee meeting that talked about the ARP fund established, and also funds for the central media. But that's all, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, we had a Rules Committee meeting on the 20th of May. We discussed the trash tax, the UT vehicle subject, which was tabled, and the service-related businesses for citizens of Logansport to start. Also, a Rules Committee meeting today, 7th of June. We discussed Mayor's appointment to the Historical Preservation Commission of Rich Voorhees and the vacant property registry. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other reports? Seeing none, on the old business, opening bids and awarding bid for 411 Cliff Drive.
First bid appears to have the lights filled in appropriately. The bid appears to be, as I read it, $6,000 plus closing costs, and their plan is to tear the structure down as soon as possible and use it as extra yard at their residence. It has the list of several neighbors.
What was that again, Kelly?
6,000 plus closing costs. And it says they're planning to tear it down. That's the way it stops. Second bid, both of which were indicated they were received at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or before. This was from Lena Pulaski. Did I say that name correctly? Maybe several copies of the same. Yeah. Council members. The plan is to bring the house back and put it back to useful property. The offer is $501. That's closing costs. Is that correct? Is that bidder here, Pulaski? Okay.
Seeing no one here. All right, so council, you've heard the 6,000 plus closing costs to tear down the structure, or $501 plus closing costs to bring it back to its original state.
The $500 bid, was that to disclaim the title and then come into
Wait,
this
I'll read it. I mean, I haven't read everything.
because they're sure they're not going to restore it for $500.
Yeah, but they're $501 to take it as is the way I would read that, and then they would spend the money to put it back.
Okay. Do we have a plan or restrictions or rules for them to complete renovation at any time, or is that up to them?
Well, I'd say probably not taking it under advisement, but they've got some detailed plans here that seem
Okay.
attached to,
Okay.
four copies.
Okay. Thank you.
My suggestion is take it under advisement,
That'd be
read
fine.
through the information to make a decision.
Are you going to open up to public comments on this subject?
Sure. Yeah, anybody in the audience have a comment they'd like to make?
Come up to the microphone and tell us your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Kim Waldron. I live at 323 Cliff Drive. My mother lives at 301 Cliff Drive. My daughter's father lives at 317 Cliff Drive. I've been on the street for 45 years, pretty much. I was born and raised there. And for as long as I have lived there, this property has been a chronic issue. It hasn't been taken care of for at least 45 years, and it was actually on the demolition list, I believe, for Logansport. And so the initial plan was, when the city bought it, to restore it. That did not happen. It has since been condemned, and anyone that has been in the property or knows anything about the property would know that there has been at least 4 feet of standing water in that basement for years. There's been no electricity, no pump to pump that water out, and the mildew that is currently there and will continue It's a hazard for anyone in there working on the property. It's been an eyesore for 45 years. And my concern is, you have a bid to restore the property, but will that be done in a timely fashion? Because there are so many properties in Logansport that have been purchased, and people say they're going to restore them, and how many of them are still sitting like they are? Again, as a 45-year resident of Cliff Drive, on behalf of myself and all of my neighbors, I think everyone on Cliff Drive would agree that this property deserves to be condemned, and the people in the neighborhood deserve to have a nice neighborhood to live in without garbage like that, and living on the hope that maybe someone will actually fix the property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is attached to the $6,000 bid a list of property owners along Cliff Drive that they have signed this, saying they approve of the bid that was submitted.
So I recommend that we accept the $6,000 bid. I don't know how this works though, but the people in the neighborhood, they feel the same way. And I know there are plenty of properties throughout the city that have been purchased with the intent, like she said, to be restored, and they just sit there.
Has the building commissioner inspected this property?
Rob has not yet. No.
Okay. Has anybody inspected that, and they can tell us if it's possible to refurbish this or not?
Wayne would have been the.
You're not an inspector, are you, sir?
That's Mr. Cox.
I understand, but you're not an inspector, correct?
No, sir. I think next door to the fuel inspector, and the mayor was over there with 2 other people, and they went through the property.
Come up to the microphone, sir. State your name and address.
We can do this one though. When they sold the other property.
I'm Bill Cox. I live at 329 Cliff Drive, right across the street from this property. The mayor and Mr. Renoir and his wife and the building commissioner was over a year or so ago. And the mayor and I believe Mr. Renoir went in the house. And I asked the building commissioner, how come you ain't going in there? He says, you're crazier than hell. I ain't going in there because it's full of mold. And there's 2 feet of water in the basement. The windows are broke out. The back windows are broke out. I boarded them up to keep the cats from going in. The city has done nothing only except mow the grass to keep it looking nice. I wired the doors shut to keep the kids out. But they break the windows in and cut the wires.
Okay.
No, tired of looking at it. I get up in the morning, you look at it out the kitchen window, you go out the back porch and sit and have coffee, you look at the doggone house that's falling down. And it's a disgrace to the south side. I thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bill.
I would be inclined to agree with Jake on the matter and award it to the first bid.
Were you over there, Mayor, and inspected the building?
We looked through it. I mean, I'm not an inspector. I'm not gonna.
Dave, didn't we
It looked bad,
just
but.
sell some properties in this same situation a couple months ago? That they bid and they,
Yeah, we sold some, none of the others had buildings that we sold, they were lots. But we
okay,
sold some properties off.
and it was the highest bid.
Well, it depended on, we had some where you had to weigh the different bids because they were, there were none with a discrepancy on the amount of money like this, but they were close enough bids that we looked at the use that they were gonna do the property, like, one of them might be gonna use it for a yard and another was gonna build a garage, which they have done or whatever, but, I think in all fairness, and I know it's time to not kick the can down the road, but we're going to have a special meeting probably in a couple of weeks to do tax abatements. They have to be done before the end of the month to start the budget process. And I'd like to take these under advisement so we can take a good look at both the bids and see if there's any legitimacy. The other individual took the time to put the bid in. Let's take the time to at least take a good look at it before we decide one way or the other.
1 minute, sir. You folks haven't even paid your taxes on it this year. As of 1 o'clock this afternoon, the city owed the taxes on it. They have not paid their taxes.
I don't know about that, sir.
Because I went to the courthouse.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't know about that, but
I'm gonna say that I would go along with, Jake and Jonathan. The house has been there, I've been over there a couple, 3 times, it is dilapidated. I'm surprised we haven't had some sort of issues there. It is in my ward, I'm all for moving on with it. I mean, I want to go through proper procedure, but I think it's time to do something. Quit messing
we
around
announced
with it.
that we were gonna do a bid tonight, make a decision. So if you guys wanna make a decision, we can do that. There's no problem with that at all.
I'm all for making that decision tonight.
If we go with the $6,000 bid, what's the timetable tearing this down? Is it a year, 2 years, 5 years, 6 months?
Read the application, sir.
Your paperwork requires that it's done within 12 months.
Within 12 months?
Paperwork, it tells you where it is. That is-
12 months
I didn't take the time to read them out loud for everybody.
Okay, so if the council approves this, then what? It has to be demolished within 12 months from the date of the date?
When I get the title, if I get the project, it'll be gone within 6 months.
Carl, he's already talked to, Bill, you say you talked to a couple different people about tearing it down?
Between 12 and 13,000, the other one's 15,000.
Okay.
And it's gonna make a nice lot, won't it?
Well, I mean, a lot of times we get the property or anything else, and then 6 months later or a year later, it's standard. I didn't read it, so apologize.
Well, the property cannot be sold for 2025.
Because of liens?
Because it's a lien.
And, okay, how did we purchase it if there's a lien on it?
I done the title work on it.
You
Okay.
have to file for quiet title in order for that to be manhandled and taken care of. It's like purchasing any other property in a tax sale.
Okay. So the motion been seconded, call for a vote.
You had a motion?
I make a motion to thought Jake did, and,
Yeah.
my friend down there seconded.
Call for question.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes?
Scott Key,
Yes.
Jacob Don,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Larry Harris,
Yes.
and Dan Quinn.
Clarifying, we're selling at 6,000 to BJ.
Yes, this is.
Or
for the-
Mr. Hoff,
this
not
is
me.
Yes.
Approved bid for the 6.
Yes.
Bid is awarded for 411 Cliff Drive to Cox for $6,000 plus closing costs. Moving on to old business ordinance 2021-12. Councilman Nelms.
Ordinance 2021-12, an amendment to ordinance 2018-28 of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, approving the charges for residential trash and recycling collection in the City of Logansport, Indiana.
Do I have a motion to move it forward for a vote?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? Any comments from the
Yes,
audience?
I want to make a comment. I talked to Dwayne earlier today, and we need to make an amendment to section 6, change that date from June the 1st to July the 1st. And on the last page, instead of May 3rd, it should say 7th of June.
Any public comment? Please come to the mic. State your name and address for us, please.
Yeah, I'm John Tritt from rural Walton, 3605 South, 1075 East. Just want to make a point that our trash collection in the county It amounts to $69.40 a month for waste management, making one stop a week. My wife and I recycle in Peru, but as a reference point, that's just short of $70 a month is what we pay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Well, I'm pretty sure on how this vote's gonna be going tonight, and I'm not gonna be real happy about it. And I guess, just like I said in the first meeting I came in here, was I had people tell me I was wasting my time. I think I'm wasting my time. And in reference to the $69 a month, I used to live in the county, but my property tax rate was a lot lower than it is in the city. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments from the audience? Any other comments from council? All right, call for question.
Dave, did you make a motion to change?
Yeah, I made a motion to amend, we have to vote on the amendments. Yeah.
Motion for the amendment, do I have a second?
Second.
Call for question on the amendment change.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jason Goff,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Scott Peters.
Yes.
Now I make a motion to approve.
I second. Any further discussion? Call for question.
Scott Peters,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Jason Goff,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-12 passes. Ordinance 2021-14, Councilman Lennon.
Ordinance 2021-14, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, authorizing of seeded funds for the survey, design, and construction documents to develop housing lots on the east end of city-owned property. I ask for ordinance 2021-14 to be moved forward for a vote.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Scott Peters,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Jason Goff,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Dave Morris.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-14 passes. Ordinance 2021-15, Councilman Hood.
Ordinance 2021-15 is an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, creating a fund and providing funding for the Fast Ag Transportation Granted School Sidewalks and Improved ADA Accessibility Project. Mayor Martin, I ask for a vote on second reading of 2021-15.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Did we discussed this the other day? Did we decide that we needed to fund this with a higher number the first year? The reason being, the Board of Works passed the contract on this Wednesday, and if you look at their outline, they have the engineering being funded over the first 3 years of the project. Now, according to Ross, we'll start getting reimbursements as we pay, but the engineering costs are going to start being charged monthly, starting probably next month, would you assume, Mayor?
I would assume, yeah.
Because they passed the contract for them to start to work on that. So what was the number we came up with?
The original number was like 60.
60, yeah.
And we're gonna need to increase that, because it's like 100,000, I think. I think the fees were, 50% on the second year, and I would say 30 this year. And
20 the last.
20 the third year.
Yeah. We thought it'd be easier to change it now than to have to come back here and do it again. So, the 30%, if we did that, Dwayne, it would be about 108,000.
Right. I think we said 110 is kind of what we
Yeah.
thought was covering the entire cost of the year.
Now, this is just money we're moving forward, paying it earlier than what we planned on.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Very much.
Okay.
Yeah, you have that in the new ordinance. Yeah.
So we need to make an adjustment to section 2 there.
So section 2, we're moving it from 65,000 to 110,000?
Yes.
I second it.
Any further discussion on the amendment change? Call for question.
Jason Don,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Scott Petey,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Amy Dennis.
No.
We have a motion to approve ordinance 2021-15 with the amendment.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? Call for question.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
No.
Jacob Don,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Scott Petey.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-15 passes on the second reading. On to new business, resolution 2021-125. Councilman Morris.
Resolution 2021-125, a resolution of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, approving the expenditure of funds from the non-reverting unsafe building fund for the removal of the Welcome Center building. I make a motion to approve.
I second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Jacob Don,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Scott Petey.
Yes.
Resolution 2021-125 passes. Resolution 2021-126, Councilman Petey.
Resolution 2021-126, resolution of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, certifying an addition of the 18th Street and Hoosier-Hartman Corridor Vision Study to the Logansport Comprehensive Plan. Mr. Mayor, I ask that we have a vote on resolution 2021-126, please.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Jacob Don,
Yes.
Scott Petey,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Resolution 2021-126 passes. Resolution 2021-127, Councilor Dinsmore.
Resolution 2021-127, a resolution of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, amending Resolution 2021-112 for the expenditure of funds for Logansport Reimagined. I'd like to move 2021-127 forward for a vote.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jonathan Mel,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Jake Don,
Yes.
Scott Peet.
Yes.
Resolution 2021-127 passes. Ordinance 2021-16, first reading. Councilman Morris.
Ordinance 2021-16, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, establishing the ARC Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, Fund 1176. This is the one Dwayne talked about earlier that we have to have established for the funds to be placed in. I make a motion to approve.
I second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Jonathan Mel,
Yes.
Jake McDonald.
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Amy Dennis.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-16 passes on its first reading.
And then I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules and move this forward.
Second.
Call for question.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jake McDonald,
Yes.
Jonathan Mel,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Scott Peet.
Yes.
Suspension of the rules passes on ordinance 2021-16.
I'll make a motion to put ordinance 2021-16 to a second vote.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Jake McDonald,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Jonathan Mel,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Scott Peet.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-16 passes on its second reading. Ordinance 2021-17, Councilman McPherson.
Ordinance 2021-17, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, appropriation monies for the purchase of a skid steer for the Logansport Park Department. Make a motion, we approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jonathan Mel,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Jake McDonald,
Yes.
Carl McPherson.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-17 passes on its first reading.
Mayor Martin, I'm going to ask that we suspend the rules and have a second reading on ordinance 2021-17 so we can move it through.
I'll second.
Call for question on suspension of rules.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Jake McDonald,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Jonathan Mel,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we vote on a second reading on ordinance 2021-17.
I second. Any further discussion? Call for question.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jonathan Mel,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Jake McDonald,
Yes.
Carl McPherson.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-17 passes on its second reading. Ordinance 2021-18, Councilman Finn.
Ordinance 2021-18, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, amending the Logansport and Fringe zoning ordinance, Logansport Gateway Overlay Standard. Mr. Mayor, I ask for a vote on ordinance 2021-18, please.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Jonathan Downs,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Jacob Dodd,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Dave Morris.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-18 passes on its first reading. Ordinance 2021-19, Councilman Nels.
Ordinance 2021-19, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, amending the Logansport and Fringe zoning ordinance table of land use. Mr. Mayor, I ask for the first vote on ordinance 2021-19.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Jonathan Downs,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jacob Dodd,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Carl McPherson.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-19 passes on its first reading. Ordinance 2021-20, Councilman McPherson.
Ordinance 2021-20, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, approving the application and funding of the Common Crossing Grant for the work on Erie Avenue.
Crossroads were the ones that were here for the subcommittee on the computer, but they wanted to come here to let you guys know. They have some better handouts than I had last time. And if you had any questions for them on this process and their requests.
Thank you.
We also have Becky Harris here for Logan's Landing, if you have any questions about her opinion on the project as well. Tony Shanks is also in the audience.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, members of the public. My name is Andrew Wool. I'm the Vice President of Crossroad Engineers, civil engineer, and former resident of the City of Logansport. I grew up and graduated in 2009 from the University of Cincinnati, and in 2004 from Logansport High School. So it's nice to be back, nice to be in front of all of you. I'd like to answer any questions you have and kind of describe what we're looking at as far as the Erie Avenue project. I've got one of my partners, Trent Newport.
I'm Trent Newport, President of Crossroad Engineers, and a resident of the area too, but from Lewis Cass and a lot older than him. So,
what we're here tonight to propose a request from you all is to begin or pursue the survey and design of what I guess we'd call phase one of the Erie Avenue project. The full reconstruction limits are from 5th to 8th Street. We would transition from the kind of the ultimate corridor between 8th and 9th. So depending on who you ask, the limits might be 5th to 8th or 5th to 9th, but the transition would be from full reconstruction to the existing corridor between 8th and 9th Street. There is a little bit of improvements along the 5th Street between Market and kind of the park area down there and the railroad That scope of work is anticipated to be some resurfacing and some sidewalk improvements, but the ultimate section in that area would ultimately be the same. The Erie Avenue, which you have in front of you, are two typical sections. The downtown district from 5th to 8th Street, you have an on-street parking section as well as the through section without on-street parking in areas where there's no parking feasible. It would be wider sidewalks, more the downtown landscape or streetscape that you guys are familiar with, street trees, lights, concrete pavers. The lane width would be 11 foot wide. The parking stalls are 8 foot wide. There's a 2 foot buffer in there on each side to account for what we would leave for a curb and gutter, but the typical section of Logansport doesn't really have that gutter section, so there's a kind of a curb offset is what we call it, 2 foot curb offset along the corridor. Kind of describes the area. We met with Mayor early on to kind of talk about this project. I know there's been some pursuit of this in the past that really hasn't gaining traction, and the goal would be to kind of piece this thing down a little bit to develop some interest and excitement for the downtown area, and then work as the city desires out towards 18th Street, long-term plan. So we kind of, with the mayor, picked the urban area, the downtown districts from 5th to 8th as kind of the phase one like I mentioned. I know there were some questions about, funding opportunities and things like that. We've talked about the CCMG 50-50 split. You're all familiar with the rural call 80-20 split. Initially, we're talking about pursuing the CCMG 50-50. I have some funding breakdowns if you'd like to look at that, or if there's any questions about the corridor or section before we go into that, or...
I just want to quickly make note that basically the areas that aren't having parking are areas that currently don't have parking. So it's basically where Erie turns into the turn and the straight lane there right before 5th Street, and then Shepler's, which currently is all drive. There's not parking there either. So the rest of the area would still have parking and the 2 lanes. So just making sure that you guys note that they'd be parking on both sides still.
And this is going to come on a 50-50 grant, meaning the city's going to put up 50% of the total project?
No, that's an option. What we're looking for today is to begin the design and survey of the area with the intent to pursue funding either the CCMG 50-50 or rural call 80-20 in the fall. Those are just a few options, a couple options for funding. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but what's the cost up front for us to do the architect work?
The upfront engineering cost is $240,000.
And that's all coming from the city, not coming anything from the grant?
That is correct. Yes. And that would be whether you pursue an 80-20 rural call or a CCMG 50-50.
For the 50-50 grant, we'd be talking what, about $1 million for the city?
Yes.
Okay, but $1 million to the city. And the other project that we had, the council voted down 4-3, was from Erie to 24. The city was only going to come up with $1 million to do the whole thing. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
You had a big grant.
So,
I just want to really quick point out,
yeah.
And Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but that grant, you're out quite a few years.
2026, I understand that. When you're talking $1 million for 5th to 8th Street, he's talking $1 million by waiting 4 years, 5 years from 5th Street to 24th Street.
Right.
And the other 2 options for funding, you have to have construction drawings before basically applying. Is that correct? So basically, if you go for one of the other 2 options other than the federal, you'd have to do construction drawings beforehand. So that's
okay. Construction drawings then from 5th Street to 24th, $200,000 also.
We've not looked at a design fee for the full
Yeah.
corridor. I will, so I think maybe, the question is whether you do the CCMG or the rural call. I think maybe where the confusion is, what we're looking to do is to get the design started. Whether you pursue a CCMG 50/50 or a rural call 80/20 this fall or in the future, regardless, you're going to be responsible for 100% of the design and survey for that project, whether it's phase one or the whole corridor. So I guess what I'm getting at is the $240,000, you're going to be paying that 100% locally, regardless of whether you do a 50/50 construction match or an 80/20 rural call match. So maybe the conversation about which funding opportunities that we would pursue is maybe, we're not there yet. What we'd like to do is to get the survey and design taken care of so we can start the construction drawings and produce a good application to the CCMG or the rural call or any other funding opportunities that may arise. Does that make sense?
So what are we talking about applying for whatever grant we're going for? What are we talking about on construction? Is it going to be finished by December 31st of 2021?
No, right now what we're looking at is to approve a design and survey contract to get the design and survey going. And then in the fall, we would pursue a rural call or a CCMG application.
So completion of this project on the other one was 2026. So we talking what, 2024, 2023?
That depends on which funding application you go after. If you guys were to decide that you wanted to pursue the CCMG, which you're exactly right, it's more expensive for the local community. It's $1 million, as you pointed out, from a construction standpoint. You would be able to turn that project around by the end of next year.
Yeah, of 2022.
2022, correct.
Okay, so, and by doing that and spending $1 million, we're saving 4 years instead of going 2026. But we're still spending $1 million, and we're only going from 5th Street to 8th Street instead of 5th Street to 24th Street.
Right, I think what maybe we're missing here is you're not spending $1 million. You're not committing to the $1 million yet.
But we will be after the survey, and you go back to the grant, we're going to be paying another $1 million besides $250,000.
The way this works is we would do the design and survey, and then based off of that, you can then pursue funding. So you can go after the 80/20 match in the fall if that's the route you desire to go. With the caveat being, you're looking at a project that wouldn't start until 2027. That's totally your choice, and that can be decided this fall.
I mean, you're correct that if you go for the faster pace, it is going to cost you more local.
Yeah,
and
that depends if the city wants to spend an extra $1 million this year or next year.
The one thing I think
I understand.
The one thing we can't comment on is you talked about what another company came with for the entire corridor. We have not vetted through what they were doing, but I don't think it was this product through the entire corridor.
My understanding was it was a pretty simplified.
No, it was going to be the same 40 to 52 feet all the way out instead of what we're doing here is going most of the places anywhere from 40 feet wide on Area Avenue, some places 52 to 24, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the sidewalks are going to be much larger. Okay.
Yeah, so that's where your extra cost will come into play.
So it depends what the city wants to do on the 7 votes, if we want to pay the $1 million now and get the project done by 2023, 2024, or, okay.
And the only other thing to consider is that the fall call, the federal call, that's the 80/20, which is the better bang for your buck, is a more competitive process. And there's not a lot of projects that are this large. You've had some in the past, but they're not easy. They don't always come maybe the first time. So you might not get it this year. You might have to split it in phases. It might be a multi-phase project.
But even on the small project we got here, the 80/20, we're not guaranteed we're going to get it or the 50/50, right?
You're not.
Yeah.
But on the 50/50, I think, as you found out in the past, pretty much, you're going to get awarded something if you put a project. So if it's your project you put in, and you do the application well.
So what we're doing tonight is funding the 250,000, 240-some thousand for architect drawing.
Exactly.
Okay. I got
When we
one
would
more
complete
question.
that, we would then make a decision
Yeah.
on what funding.
Would you like to see what the full corridor is before making a decision? I mean, we.
No, I'm just against spending $1 million at this time, but like I said before, I'm one of 7 votes, it depends on what the other council. I mean, I voted in favor of the Erie Avenue project from 5th Street to 24th, but I was on the losing side of that, so we'll see how we come out on this. That's what I'm saying, the extra $250,000, but we
In
can
my
always
case-
take it from the general fund.
I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing the amounts for in the whole corridor, because that's one of the reasons I voted down the Erie project the last time, because I didn't think enough was being done. But so I'd like to see the cost estimates for the whole corridor.
And that way you guys can decide from that, if you want to go in the different sections. You can do the full construction drawings, and then you at least have that, what they were saying, when you do the federal draws, it's better to show that you've done work. That helps with your application too. And so by doing some of these steps beforehand, it can help that opportunity. I just wanted to throw that out because that seems to be one of the discussion points is we're only going to 8th Street or 9th Street versus the whole corridor. The reason that was brought forward because obviously there's less cost in doing just one section, but we can always bring that full cost forward if that's something.
And I think it's good to be aware, as Trent mentioned, the rural call's highly competitive, and, you know, there's only X amount of dollars available, where the CCNG pretty much have $1 million every year. So with a project size of 5th Street to 18th Street, that's going to be a huge project, and you're going to be competing for, say it might come out to $5 million. If there's only $5 million of funding available from the state, they're only going to give, you're basically requesting for the whole pool of money for one community. So you have to also think about those types of things, where the state is trying to spread the money around. So it might be better, I mean, we would recommend that you do kind of try to piece it down a little bit and going a huge scale project from that perspective.
It's in really bad shape now.
Yeah, and that's
one of our main routes into town too.
And that's kind of why we were talking with the mayor to try to get something going. And
if you get that first section, if you do that first section, and let's say you do the CCMG funding, that the rest of the project, that helps an application for a future phase or two for the rest of it. Maybe that's a federal 80-20 split. However you get
Can I ask you a couple of questions? So you're saying in an 80-20, the federal doesn't pay any of the design work?
Well, what we did in this one is we show it as not paying the design of the right-of-way because you would be more competitive in your application. They can cover design and right-of-way.
Well, that's what I wondered, because I was thinking when we looked at it before that they did the 80-20 look, it just, I mean, it's just the way it was broken
They
down.
can, but like you said, you're asking for just even more of the money out of the pool, so.
Well, I guess the question I have for you is, and I mean, this is just me thinking out loud, is I mean, the CCMG, just looking at this, we'd be better off to wait till next year to apply for the spring, the 22, because we can't use the full million even if we wanted to, correct? Which is why you say we would potentially have another 225,000.
Oh, you mean because of the 837 that shows there?
Yes.
Well, what that's showing is that there are certain things that funding won't cover. So there's some things that would be on the local, which is like the lighting.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
And
that funding mechanism just doesn't cover some of the bells and whistles.
Right. As far as the time frame question, we would anticipate the CCMG application to come out around the July time frame. It's not been released yet.
Right, it's here in July, August.
Yes. So then, a few months to get the application in. I think it's like 3 to 4 months to get the turnaround from the state. So we would we would anticipate around February of 2022 is when the city would be granted that money.
So, so my question, I guess, what I'm saying, or what I'm asking is that if we said, let's start the design work, regardless of either way we decided to go, that if we wanted to, we could use it towards the 80-20 match.
Exactly.
I mean, we haven't eliminated either option.
Correct. You're
By
exactly
saying we want to start the work.
And that's what I was trying to reiterate. You know, if you start now, if you approve the design now, you're not committing up to $1 million right now. You're committing to the 240 to get the process started for the design and survey. And then when the applications come out for whether it's CCNG, if you all want to pursue a CCNG, then we can say, yes, let's go after the CCNG. If we don't want to swallow $1 million to do that for that small section, we can say, okay, we're going to look for the rural fall, more later in the fall, and we've got a good investment started. We can have a better application because the city's invested, some surveying, some design. We can have better drawings put together.
Make it better, a more competitive
For that
application. Right.
Yeah. And as I mentioned,
But if we go to the rural code, according to this, we're, talking 2027?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a ways out.
So, what's it gonna cost us to do a survey and design from, Fifth Street all the way to 24th?
And that's what we've not evaluated the full design for all of that. The issue,
I remember the RQ only went to 18th Street, and it was around $1 million.
18th Street then.
And that's what I was saying, what we could do is look at that and bring that back if you want to look at the full corridor and what it would cost to do construction drawings, because like you're saying, no matter what, those construction drawings, even if it's 5 years down the road, you still can use those construction drawings.
And that's kind of the way we did High Street. I mean, we broke it up in a couple chunks, and we did one part with the first CC, and then we finished it up with the next one. But
Well, when you did the design and the survey on High Street, what did it cost you?
I don't know. I have to go back and look for a couple $100,000.
Okay, a couple $100,000 for High Street, and High Street went from where? 3rd Street to 24th?
Well, we had 2 sections.
Okay, High Street to 12th?
I don't know.
Okay, but what I'm saying, you spent $200,000 for that. For the $240,000 for the survey and stuff, why can't we get more length of Erie Avenue for the 240 or 300,000, whatever we're going to be putting up?
So one of the things was, from the last discussion, my understanding, was that we wanted to do more than just pave. So because we wanted to do more than just pave, we shrunk it up, added the trees and that type of work, which would, in essence, create more construction documents that we have to do. So that's why it costs a little bit more than what you were seeing before.
It's in part with, brand new everything, obviously, from the ground up. I think you actually, from previous people that looked at this, you had some other design fees, and this is less than that.
Oh, yeah.
Just as a comparison.
Well,
and Aaron's got those that you guys can review.
Yeah, we can send those out.
What was the other design fee then, Aaron? Do you remember? Approximately within $1 million?
it was around $1 million.
I think for this phase, it was 300.
yeah, about $310,000 for this phase.
I don't remember what the total,
I didn't see a breakdown. I just saw one lump sum.
That was in 2017. It was,
There's been multiple different looks at it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this was the most recent one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, the one before was, there was.
yeah, the one before, or one done in 2017 was from the same limits. Was $310,000, around $310,000. It also had $100,000 on top of that for right of way. What we're proposing is $240,000 for the same limits and no right of way.
What is the council, I know it makes a better application, but what if we would split the survey design cost? Would you guys be in favor of that?
What do you mean split this?
Split with who?
Well, it'd be cheaper if we, you guys were talking about earlier, the $240,000 could be split in half through the federal grant, right?
No, it could be funded 80-20 in the application.
Okay.
Yeah, but you don't.
That would be if you were awarded, so that'd be when you're awarded, then it could be.
Yeah, you don't start now in that case. So, I mean, that's certainly an option, is to say, well, we're just going to kick the can down the road and wait on the application, put everything together and ask for the full thing. But again, with it being that big of a project and being that competitive, you make it nothing.
Yeah.
It's probably better to ask for the funding for construction versus the drawings in a competitive situation, I guess, is kind of one of the things.
I got you.
And Carl, just so that you're aware, what we're looking at is, of that 240, about 9,000 would be for the survey. There's a geotech and pavement design fee, so that would be optional, but that's around $17,000. The reason that we recommend that is because of the age and doing underground improvements and it being, the old area canal. Once you start tearing the road up, you just never know what you're going to get into. So that's $17,000, if you will, of insurance versus paying that through a change order during construction. There's utility coordination fees, so that would be dealing with LMU, AT&T, the area utilities during the design. That's $15,000 of that. Permitting and bidding is $10,000. So there's pieces of that 240 that wouldn't necessarily be immediate upfront costs. That could be later on down the road, more into the fall, that you wouldn't necessarily encumber immediately. That makes sense.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, again, it's council's vote, the $240,000 to do 5th to 8th Street.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying, so.
I think, yeah.
I guess I'm just disappointed in the fact that it's 5th to 8th Street. If we did a traffic study and that only 5% of the traffic that travels Erie Avenue travels that section, when you come into town at 18th Street, that's what showcases our city, and it's quite depressing. So, and if you even look at the map, there aren't businesses along there. And I'm not interested in this section.
Would you guys like us to bring forward the whole section and give you the two different sections? The reason why we paired it this way was this is the commercial area and that's the residential area to some degree. And this is the smaller section. So if you guys would rather look at the residential and us bring in that cost estimate, that's fine. We were just trying to phase it in a way to bring it forward to you. So we could, table it and then bring it back to the next meeting and actually give you the full corridor and the two options of the commercial and the residential.
Numerous options would be very helpful.
We did the two options, like Aaron said, for the whole corridor. Again, map both of those.
And I'm sure when you came into town tonight, you thought, this is
One
where I
more
live.
question on sidewalks from 5th to 8th, and like you said, the commercial section, how wide are the sidewalks right now, approximately?
About 5 to 6 feet.
5 to 6, and what are they going to be?
I'm going to say about 16 feet.
16 feet wide in the commercial area?
Which is what our typical downtown runs from 12 to 16 feet wide.
Okay.
That's
5th to 8th, they're going to be 16 feet wide.
The idea behind that was also provide opportunities for businesses to use some of that frontage as, seating areas, should things develop different things. But it was to allow extra space for other uses besides just 6-foot pedestrian walkway.
But there's not many businesses there.
No, you're exactly right.
Why put in a 16-foot sidewalk in front of something that's an old building that's vacant?
Well, the idea is for development, for redevelopment type purposes.
At the moment, you have, if you enter Erie Avenue at 5th, there's the Brownfield Nipsco area. Then there's the Avenue Bar, which does also serve food and would probably love to have sidewalk seating. I haven't spoken to them. In the old Happy Soap building, you now have a new storefront showroom of Cervantes Construction, and the other half of that building is a consignment store, gently used furniture, etc., called, I cannot remember the name of the place, but it's there. Opposite side of the street is vacant, the hill that leads up to the back of Calvary Church, and then you have Fiberglass Freaks, the Batmobile guy. They are going to keep their actual studio where they do the work on the Batmobiles there when they get their Market Street Museum open. So you do have some businesses there.
I was just going to point out that the Batmobile Museum, as well as what used to be Nearly New, does have storefronts on the Erie. They currently aren't used, but that has been used in the past as well.
And the reason I think that the initial suggestion was made to start at this end is because there's already a template for streetscape in the downtown district. So you're not starting from scratch. You're not having to say, well, how wide do you want the sidewalks? There's already the template. And then as the mayor had said at one of our early meetings, everybody's been through a lot with the year of COVID, but downtown's just taken one hit after another. We're 2.5 years into the 2-year Melbourne Avenue reconstruction project. We've got potentially the urban park coming along. We've got the 3rd Street, Melbourne Avenue intersection closed again. We've taken a lot of hits downtown. And if you're going to break this into phases, and you want to consider making the first phase the downtown side, certainly that would go a long way towards letting downtown know that they're not forgotten. I understand that's just one of many options.
Oh, 5th to 8th is considered downtown?
Yes, sir.
5th to what street? Does it end at 8?
It ends at 8, yes, sir. Which I guess is why that was the dividing line that was discussed. And then they talked about a 1-block transition from 8th to 9th to transition into the residential streetscape for the remainder of it, which would potentially be a future project, as I understand.
Tonight, the only thing we got there is the old St. Vincent's Church that's fallen down, and he managed whatever they did with the old school, and I don't know who's in the housing now. It used to be,
I think those are on Spencer Street.
Pardon?
I think the old St. Vincent and the mass on Spencer Street.
But the back end comes up the area.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. They've got some murals on the walls at the back of the mass.
Yeah, the wall is falling down.
That's why it was kind of a good transition, because the next block is really when you start more of the residential area. But if the council would like us to bring forward the multiple different options and costs, then you guys can decide to do the whole thing, or you can decide to do the residential portion. That's up to you guys. We just brought this section, like I said, because it was one of the smaller ones for the full commercial area. And last time I understood it was too large of a project before.
I'm just going to make a motion to move this forward for a vote.
I'll second on that.
You have a motion to approve?
That already happened.
Second? Right, this was discussion. Sorry, there was a lot of discussion with that one.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion?
One last question. Let's say we vote to approve this, are you still going to run the numbers on the full project, and it wouldn't really have an impact? We just have a difference to make up if we decided to go further or whatever.
Yeah.
So the only thing we're voting on then is the survey and design only at this time for the 247.
Correct.
Okay.
Call for question.
Jake Brown,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Amy Dinsmore,
No.
Robert Pierce,
No.
Scott Beatty,
No.
Jonathan Nelms,
Yes.
Larry Hood.
No. Ordinance 2021-20 does not pass. Thank you, Eric. Ordinance 2021-21, Councilman Beatty. Yes, sir.
Ordinance 2021-21, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, approving a change in septic disposal fees of the Logansport Sewage Department. Mr. Mayor, I ask for a vote on ordinance 2021-21, please.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Now, these are just a couple commercial fees. I believe these fees only affect like 2 big industrial companies in town, so. Or no, I take that back. This is the one with the dumping fees, isn't it? So.
This is the dumping fees
Yeah.
where they,
So if they pump out your septic, they're going to charge you a little more to do it. But
If I remember correctly, Dave, they wanted us to suspend the rules on this one, right?
Yes, this one and the next one. He wants them to go into effect July 1.
Call for question on ordinance 2021-21, first reading.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Jake Vidal,
Yes.
Amy Denzel,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Larry Hood.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-21 passes on its first reading.
I ask that we suspend the rules and put ordinance 2021-21 up for a second reading vote.
Second. Call for question on suspension of rules.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Amy Denzel,
Yes.
Jake Vidal,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
I make a motion to put ordinance 2021-21 up for a second vote.
A second. Any further discussion? Call for question.
Jake Vidal,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Amy Denzel,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Larry Hood.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-21 passes on the second reading. Ordinance 2021-22, Councilman Ladon.
Ordinance 2021-22, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, approving a change in industrial surcharge fees of the Logansport Sewage Department. I ask for a vote on ordinance 2021-22.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Amy Denzel,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jake Vidal.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-22 passes on its first reading.
I would ask that we suspend the rules for this ordinance as well.
Second.
Call for question.
Jake Vidal,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Amy Denzel,
Yes.
We have a motion to pass ordinance 2021-22 on second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Jonathan Nell,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jake Vidal,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Amy Denzel,
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-22 passes on the second reading. Ordinance 2021-23, Councilman McPherson.
Ordinance 2021-23, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport approving the installation, the operation of the monitoring and weather station at the wastewater treatment plant. Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to, first of all, I'd like to thank the coalition. They stepped forward here and have volunteered to purchase both the ambient air monitoring system and the weather instruments. Their nonprofit is going to pay about, I believe it's about $13,000 for this equipment. And part of this ordinance is also to contract with them to help us learn how to properly take the samples, do the monitoring, and set the standards that we expect to stay under as far as the elements that we're going to be testing for. There's 5 different elements that we'll be testing for. So this is just a way for us to locate this system right on the west edge of town to protect the community. That's where the highest concentration would come into the city, so that's where we feel like it'll be the best. And over time, the wastewater treatment employees, Greg has agreed to work with our consultant, Malcolm Jarrell, to learn how to do the operation on their own. So he'll work with them for a while, and after a while, they'll do that along with their other testing out at the wastewater treatment plant. So I think it's a win for the city and a win for the community, so.
I think, Dave, even if the coalition hadn't done that,
Yes.
it would have been a great idea for us to go forward with it anyway.
Yeah.
Just protecting our interests.
Yeah. Well, we were going that direction, and they stepped up, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Call the question?
Scott Beatty,
Yes.
Larry Ritter,
Yes.
Jonathan Allen,
Yes.
Jacob Donovan.
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-23 passes on its first reading.
I make a motion
Thank you, Carl.
to move to the second reading.
Second.
Call for
Suspend the
question.
rules and move
Yes.
to.
Yep, call for question on
Thanks,
suspension
Larry.
rules.
No problem.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jacob Donovan.
Yes.
Jonathan Allen,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Scott Beatty,
Yes.
I make a motion to vote on the second reading.
Second.
Call for question?
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jacob Donovan,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Amy Dennis,
Yes.
Scott Beatty,
Yes.
Larry Hood,
Yes.
Jonathan Allen,
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-23 passes on its second reading. Ordinance 2021-24, Counselor Dinsmore.
Ordinance 2021-24, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, approving funding for the Vision Plan Services for the 18th Street Hoosier Heartland Corridor. I'd like to move ordinance 2021-24 forward for a vote.
I second.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to make one comment. After our subcommittee meeting, I had talked to Synthesis, who is on here. If you have any questions, they're just waiting for a couple hours and see if you have any questions. But anyway, I found out that if we wanted to get an estimate for the regional stormwater, we could add $2,500 to this contract and we can get an estimate. I thought that might be a good idea so that when we're looking at the different funding sources, we would know what we were looking at cost-wise, if that was the direction we wanted to go. So I'm just throwing that out there as an additional option to add to the contract. I was trying to find what is currently.
Well, if we don't do this now, what's it gonna cost us later?
I don't know. Okay.
Aaron, I think that's.
It's already in there, Aaron.
I said it was 97.
Oh, you did? Okay. So that was, I had talked to Dwayne and I said that was, I thought that would be a good idea to add in, so.
Yeah, it's already in there.
Great, Dwayne did it for me, never mind, I didn't say it. Just
The
approved.
original proposal that
Yeah.
was made was for 95.
Yes.
And then you contacted me.
Right. I just felt like that would be a good idea so that we know what we're looking at down the road.
Any further discussion?
They are on here.
Anybody have any questions for Synthesis?
Yeah, I don't really have one for them. Excuse me, but I do want to ask you, I'm in favor of moving this forward, but I was curious, did you sign a new contract with Bugston? I noticed they're in here quite a bit and our contract ran out, didn't it?
Our contract ran out though, correct?
Correct.
With Buxton?
I mean, the next finance committee, we will want to bring it forward again. he requested and be out, be around it for 12 months.
But they basically were wanting the additional information that Buxton already has, and working with that data. And then if you guys do sign the additional contract, they would use that additional data.
Okay, because I thought it said something in here about the owner
Yes,
would.
yeah, to work with Buxton.
Would you bid?
And that was for the RFP, so, if you don't decide to renew the contract, then we would just not pay that portion of the contract. That was kind of us being able to say, these are the type of uses that are appropriate for area and why, when we put the RFP together.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Amy Dinsmore,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jake McDonald,
Yes.
Jonathan Allen,
Yes.
Larry Hill,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-24 passes on its first reading.
I'd like to suspend the rules on this.
I second.
Call for question on suspension of rules.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Larry Hill,
Yes.
Jonathan Allen,
Yes.
Jake McDonald,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Amy Dinsmore,
Yes.
I have a motion to approve ordinance 2021-24 on its second reading.
So moved. I second.
Call for question.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Jake McDonald,
Yes.
Jonathan Allen,
Yes.
Carl McPherson,
Yes.
Larry Hill,
Yes.
Scott Peet,
Yes.
Amy Dinsmore,
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-24 passes on its second reading. Do we have any public comments? Anyone in the audience who'd like to come forward, please step up to the mic. Name and address for us, please.
Good evening, Council. Dave Kitchell, 1423 North Street. We all have a responsibility to take care of our city employees, whether they're like Scott, a utilities employee on the job, and they're dealing with dangerous situations every day, and electric lines, and sewer lines. The police that are at a standoff, a hostage situation like we had in Barr 2 years ago, or the fire department going in a burning building and trying to rescue people. But, you know, the building commissioner of this community has a pretty dangerous job, too. And the previous building commissioner that we had dogs, attack dogs unleashed on. He had to go to civil court to reclaim damages to help him out of a work situation. The previous building commissioner also rescued a lady's check for several $100s from a trash truck that was running away because she'd inadvertently thrown away her trash. He served for us in several capacities, including as an interpreter for the city, free of charge, because he was bilingual. And it was not my hire. He was hired by Ted Franklin, the previous mayor, but I kept him on. I kept all employees on because we try to owe it to the city employees that have the experience, that have the knowledge, that have the background and the commitment, because these are not jobs that anybody would want to have necessarily. At the Board of Works on Wednesday, we had a case in 1406 High Street where there was feces on the floor, and pictures of that. And our deputy mayor was shaking his head. We all were. We saw those pictures. It was just unsightly. And this is what the building commissioner and sometimes the code enforcement officer deal with every day when they go out on the job. For him to be dismissed the way he was and the way it was handled is a real travesty to the city. And for him, I'm sorry. For us, I'm ashamed as a city that we did this. I don't think if we had hired Travis Shike or if we'd hired Rich Bear and said, we're going to make you the chief, but you're going to take a $5,000 pay cut, that would fly. And I wouldn't blame either one of those men if they'd walked away. I wish Rob Renowans well. I've known him for probably 30 years, known his dad and his mom, and I think he'll do a crack-up job for us. He'll be great. But, looking at the salaries today of our peer cities, and I realize that that's not a program the current administration uses anymore, but the current salary we now have for Rob is 15% below the peer cities on average. That's $8,000. And when this mayor ran for office at the candidate forum, where we actually discussed the Erie Avenue project, and he said that we'd probably have to use a grant, and he didn't want to use a grant for this. He said he wanted high-paying jobs for people because you just can't find high-paying jobs here. So why are we cutting the salary of a building commissioner to hire one? At the very best, this is a poor administrative decision. It should not ever happen again in the city. At the least, it is a very racist decision that should never happen in the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Any other public comments? Please come forward to the mic. State your name and address for us, please.
Mercedes Brew, 1315 East Market Street. I have a lot of opinions, but I don't have a vote. Thank you for voting to tear down the Welcome Center. That's going to be wonderful. I'd like to ask you about the thing I'm confused about in the agenda. We've got two places where we talk about vision study. One is where you voted to include the vision study in the comprehensive plan, and the other is to fund the vision study. Is that the same thing?
It's the second phase of that study.
Oh, okay. Okay. I had a chance to look a little bit at the vision study that was included in your packet, and I'm just, encouraging you to think long-term for the vision that you have for the city. I didn't get a lot of time to look at this, but it looks like they're advocating for a civic center, maybe, along the bypass. And just think about that. Civic center, that's the center of your city. Going to put a civic center on the bypass? Think about that. Erie Avenue, great project. It seems to me that it's wide enough to include bike paths or a trail, so maybe that's something to think about. And thank you so much for funding the maintenance on the air monitor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, council member comments?
I agree with Mercedes about the running paths and the biking, because a lot of people do use that to head out to the trail, Little Turtle Waterway.
I guess I have just a quick couple statements here. I agree with the mayor's comment at the beginning that I'm happy to have Councilman Hood back. Didn't feel quite the same with him missing. I'm happy to see 411 Cliff Drive something finally happening with that property. That's taking a few months of work, but I'm glad to see progress finally made. I'm happy about the air monitor system. I think that's phenomenal. We can't do too much. We couldn't do too much with WSP from the city standpoint. So being able to do anything is a good deal for us. And finally, I'd just like to address my vote on the trash rate. This isn't anything that I was looking forward to. I had doubts all the way up to my vote, probably why I hesitated. In the end, it came down to the data that was provided to me and the only interactions I had in the public with concerned constituents to keep the city viable financially in the future. So.
Any other council member comments? Seeing none, miscellaneous business and any matters not already considered, including ADA Section 504 compliance or concerns. Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Call for question.
Steve Morris,
Yes.
Dave Don,
Yes.
Amy Denford,
Yes.
very good.
Yes.
Scott Beatty,
Yes.
John Nell,
Yes.
Darwin Terry.
Yes.
It's 8 PM. We are adjourned. Have a great night.
Thank you. Probably the 16th. To get everybody to get into Billy says he didn't want to wait for a guy and have everybody come in, that's fine. Yeah, that's what I'm interested in, and like I said before, I mean, nothing against y'all, about doing the project or anything, but going from 5th Street to 8th Street, to me, I mean, for another $100,000 or $200,000, we can do it the form, for design, anything. I think I'd be better, I mean, something has to be done with Erie Avenue sometime. It's getting so bad. So what happens? But one day what you're gonna find, you're